They were voices of hope, singing praises that moved millions. But somewhere along the way, their faith faded and their lives took a tragic turn. From secret struggles to shocking falls from grace, these gospel legends faced crises that shattered their spiritual legacies. Some walked away from God, others fell into scandal, addiction, or obscurity. Today, we uncover the truth about the 20 gospel icons who lost their faith and how their stories serve as a warning to us all. 1.
The gratitude that I feel for you right now.
Marvin Sapp remains one of gospel music's most powerful voices, a man whose soaring vocals and heartfelt lyrics have inspired millions. Yet even legends face moments when faith wavers, when the weight of life's trials threatens to drown out the song. For Sapp, that test came in the form of an unimaginable loss, the death of his beloved wife, Melinda, in 2010 after a battle with colon cancer. The pain was crushing. They had built a life together, not just as partners, but as ministers, parents, and pillars in their community. Her passing left them a widower with 3 children to raise alone. And in the midst of grief, the man who had once declared never would have made it found himself questioning, struggling, even stumbling. Interviews and sermons from that time reveal a raw honesty. Sapp admitted there were days when he didn't want to preach, when the praise felt hollow, when the weight of sorrow made it hard to stand on stage and sing about God's goodness. But unlike some artists who walk away from faith or music altogether, Sapp didn't collapse. He leaned into the very truths he had spent years proclaiming. His music became his ministry and his therapy. Albums like I Win, 2012, and Close, 2017, weren't just projects. They were testimonies of a man wrestling with pain, but refusing to let go of hope. He didn't sugarcoat the struggle. Sermons and interviews often touched on his loneliness, the difficulty of dating again, and the challenge of balancing ministry with single parenthood. The industry took notice. While some gospel artists fade after personal tragedy or shift to secular sounds, Sapp's audience remained loyal, perhaps because his authenticity mirrored their own battles. His 2023 album Substance proved he hadn't lost his touch, debuting at #1 on Billboard's gospel charts. Still, those who know his story hear the difference. The deeper gravitas in his voice, the way his lyrics linger on resilience. 2.
It's amazing how
your patience with me, God will never leave.
you don't give up on me.
Kirk Franklin's story is one of triumph, turmoil, and relentless transparency, a journey that has made him not just a gospel icon, but a living testament to the messy, complicated walk of faith. For decades, his name has been synonymous with groundbreaking gospel music, from the raw energy of Stomp to the soul-stirring vulnerability of Asterisk Imagine Me. Asterisk, yet behind the Grammy Awards, platinum records, and electrifying performances, Franklin has battled private demons that threaten to derail both his career and his spirit. He's never shied away from the truth. In interviews, sermons, and even his 2019 memoir, The Blueprint, Franklin has laid bare his struggles, how the absence of his biological father left deep wounds, how the pressures of fame clashed with his role as a husband and father, and how, at the height of his success, he found himself trapped in a cycle of pornography addiction. At one point, the shame grew so heavy that he stepped away from ministry altogether, questioning whether he was even fit to lead others spiritually. Then there were the public fractures, his strained relationship with his son, Karion, playing out on social media, the painful rift with his gospel group, The Family, and the critics who accuse him of diluting gospel music with too much secular appeal. Yet through every storm, Franklin did something rare for a man of stature. He kept showing up, flaws and all. His music evolved, becoming less about polished perfection and more about gritty redemption. Tracks like Strong God and Love Theory weren't just sermons set to beats. They were survival anthems, proof that faith isn't the absence of struggle but the fight through it. 3.
World seems so cloudy, Lord, guide me until I'm...
Yolanda Adams has always moved through the music industry with a quiet grace, her voice carrying the kind of power that doesn't just fill stadiums but seems to lift them. For years, she stood as gospel music's elegant ambassador, blending Sunday morning fire with Saturday night sophistication. Yet somewhere along the way, the same versatility that made her a legend also became a point of tension, a dividing line between tradition and evolution. Her early work, like the timeless A Battle is the Lord's, anchored her firmly in church music. But as her star rose, so did her sound. The platinum-selling Mountain High, Valley Low didn't just cross over. It soared, earning her a Grammy and opening doors in spaces where gospel artists rarely ventured. Suddenly, Yolanda wasn't just singing for the choir. She was crooning on talk shows, collaborated with jazz musicians, and crafting melodies that felt as comfortable in a coffee house as they did in a worship service. Not everyone celebrated the shift. Longtime fans whispered that she'd strayed too far, that the bluesy runs and polished production had smoothed away too much of the raw, Holy Ghost energy that once defined her. When she teamed up with secular artists or dipped into inspirational pop territory, some accused her of chasing relevance at the expense of reverence. Even her ventures into television and motivational speaking, though well-intentioned, left a portion of her base wondering if she'd left the pulpit behind. But those closest to music heard the truth. Yolanda wasn't abandoning gospel. She was expanding its borders. In interviews, she spoke plainly about her mission to meet people where they were, to wrap truth in sound that might sneak past guarded hearts. And when she did return to her roots, like on the 2011 album Becoming, it was clear the anointing had never left. For
Follow my mercy, and your grace is so good.
BB and CeCe Winins emerged from gospel music's royal family with a sound so pure it felt like heaven itself had tuned their voices. Together, they crafted harmonies that defined contemporary gospel in the late 80s and early 90s, blending sibling synergy with spiritual depth. Their Grammy-winning collaborations like Addictive Love and Heaven became the soundtrack of faith for a generation. But even crowns tilt sometimes, and both siblings face moments when their choices made the church hold its breath. CeCe, often seen as a more reserved of the two, found herself at the center of quiet controversy when she stepped onto a stage with Kenny G for his 2002 holiday special. To some, it was just a musical collaboration, a soaring voice meeting a smooth saxophone. But to gospel purists, it felt like a boundary crossed, a sacred voice mingling too comfortably with secular sounds. The whispers grew louder when she later performed at events seen as straying from traditional gospel circles. Yet CeCe never faltered in her conviction that music, in any setting, could be ministry. Her solo work, like the timeless Alabaster Box, kept her anchored in the church even as her wings carried her elsewhere. BB, the more outwardly charismatic brother, faced different storms. His undeniable genius for crafting hits sometimes clashed with the expectations placed on Winins. There were rumors of industry clashes, financial strains, and a 2013 arrest for domestic dispute, a moment that sent shockwaves through the gospel community. 5.
Your mind. You open your eyes to global.
From the choir loft to the courtroom, the tragic fall of R. Kelly. Long before the scandals, the lawsuits, and the devastating criminal convictions, Robert Sylvester Kelly was just a gifted kid from Chicago's South Side with a voice that could shake the rafters of any church. His musical roots were undeniably gospel. Raised in pews, he honed his skills with his siblings and the Kelly Brothers, a group that blended sanctified harmonies with the raw energy of 1980s gospel. Those who heard him back then remember something undeniable, a voice too big to stay confined to the choir stand. But the same talent that could have made him a gospel legend became his ticket out of the church. By the early 1990s, Kelly had reinvented himself as R. Kelly, the king of central R&B, crafting slow jams and anthems like Bump and Grind and I Believe I Can Fly, a song that, ironically, became a gospel-tinged inspirational staple even as its creator spiraled into darkness. For years, his genius as a hitmaker overshadowed the whispers, the lawsuits, and the horrifying allegations that trailed him like a shadow. Then came the damning evidence, the tapes, the testimonies, the chilling surviving R. Kelly docuseries, and with it, the irreversible collapse of his legacy. In 2022, decades of evasion ended with a federal conviction for sex trafficking and exploitation, sealing his fate as one of music's most notorious fallen stars. The tragedy of R. Kelly isn't just in the crimes he committed, but in the gifts he squandered. There was a path where that voice, that electrifying musicality, could have lifted people instead of destroying them, where the boy who once sang of heaven's joy might have become a different kind of legend. Instead, his story stands as a grim warning. That talent without character is a ticking time bomb, and that no amount of fame can silence the truth forever. 6.
That she thought she couldn't last.
Kimberly, a voice anointed, a legacy complicated. Few voices in gospel music carry the sheer force of Kimberly's. With a raspy, jazz-inflected delivery that bends notes like wrought iron in a furnace, she stands as one of the genre's most technically gifted vocalists, a singer's singer who could turn a hymn into a transcendent experience. From her early days with Everlasting Life to her electrifying features on secular tracks like Frank Ocean's Godspeed, Burrell's gift was undeniable. But in recent years, her musical brilliance has been overshadowed by controversy, leaving many to wonder how such an anointed vessel could find herself at the center of storms she seemingly helped conjure. The turning point came in late 2016 when a fiery sermon, later widely circulated online, condemned homosexuality in harsh, unyielding terms. The backlash was swift. The LGBTQ+ community, including many of her own fans, felt betrayed by words that stung deeper coming from someone whose music had often spoken of unconditional love. Performances were canceled, including an invitation to sing at Aretha Franklin's tribute concert, and longtime collaborators distanced themselves. Then came her vocal defense of R. Kelly in 2019, doubling down on support even as damning evidence against him mounted. To many, it felt like a pattern, a willingness to alienate in the name of conviction. Yet Burrell remains an enigma. For every critic, there's a devotee who points to her tireless mentorship of younger artists or her undiminished vocal prowess. Her 2021 Verzuz battle against Patti LaBelle reminded the world that, artistically, she still operates at a celestial level, but the shadow lingers. In an era where gospel artists increasingly walk the tightrope between tradition and cultural progress, Burrell's stance has left her stranded between two worlds. Too uncompromising for the mainstream, too controversial for the church's old guard. 7. Tone. Later known as B. Slade, was once gospel music's most exciting young innovator before becoming its most controversial exile. His story reads like a modern parable about art, identity, and the high cost of truth in an industry built on image. When he exploded onto the scene in 1998 with his debut album, pronounced Tone, the San Diego native brought a radical new energy to gospel. His sound was a thrilling collision, the sanctified fervor of Sunday morning worship crashing into hip-hop beats and silken R&B vocals. He wasn't just pushing boundaries. He was redrawing the entire map of contemporary gospel. For a few glorious years, Tone stood at the vanguard of musical revolution, earning comparisons to Kirk Franklin and breathing new life into a genre that often resisted change. But even as the star rose, whispers followed him. In the tightly knit world of black gospel music, where reputation is currency and conformity is often the price of admission, Tone's unapologetic artistry made some uncomfortable long before his personal life became tabloid fodder. By the mid-2000s, the rumors about his sexuality grew too loud to ignore. When he finally came out as gay, the backlash was swift and severe. Radio stations purged his music from playlists. Promoters canceled shows. The same religious institutions that had championed his genius now treated him like a cautionary tale. What happened next was either a fall from grace or a hard-won liberation, depending on who you ask. Shedding his gospel persona like a second skin, Tone reinvented himself as B. Slade, a bold, queer artist making secular music that refused to be boxed in. His new work was grittier, more sexually frank, and unflinching in its exploration of identity. Where gospel had demanded he shrink himself, R&B and pop allowed him to expand. Songs like The Good Book became anthems for those navigating the treacherous waters between faith and sexuality. The gospel world's rejection left scars. In interviews, he's spoken about the whiplash of going from celebrated to shunned, about the financial struggles that followed his exile, about watching his life's work get erased from the genre's history books. But there's also defiance in his story, the kind that comes when an artist chooses authenticity over acceptance. Today, His influence lives on in the younger generation of genre-bending, boundary-breaking artists who no longer see spirituality and selfhood as incompatible. 8.
Lamont didn't only remember that his daddy said wait for him.
LaShawn Pace, the towering voice that endured life's deepest valleys. There are voices that shake rooms. And then there was LaShawn Pace, a force of nature whose contralto could rattle your bones while soothing your spirit. As part of the legendary Pace family and later as a solo artist, she helped define the sound of contemporary gospel in the 80s and 90s with raw, unvarnished testimony set to music. Her 1991 hit, I Know I've Been Changed, wasn't just a song. It was a spiritual experience, belted with a conviction of someone who'd lived every word. But behind those roof-raising performances lay a life marked by profound struggles. In her later years, Pace faced health battles that would have silenced lesser artists, including kidney failure that required dialysis 3 times a week. The medical bills piled up, forcing the Grammy-nominated singer to make heartbreaking public appeals for financial help. There was something particularly cruel about watching a woman whose voice had brought millions to their knees now needing assistance to keep her own body standing. The gospel industry, so quick to celebrate artists in their prime, often struggles to support them in their valleys. Pace's financial woes laid bare the uncomfortable truth about how many gospel legends end up, their music filling churches and their pockets remaining empty. Yet through it all, she kept singing. Even when wheelchair-bound for performances, that voice remained indomitable, a testament to what happens when gift outlasts circumstance. Her 2022 passing at 66 felt like the end of an era, but also a reminder of the unbreakable spirit she embodied. In a genre that sometimes values spectacle over substance, LaShawn Pace's legacy endures as raw, real, and resilient as her signature ad-libs. Proof that the most powerful gospel doesn't come from perfection, but from surviving life's refiner's fire with your faith and your voice intact. 9. Dottie Peoples, the queen of On Time God, whose legacy outlasted changing tides, ***. There was a time when you couldn't step into a black church without hearing the triumphant strains of Dottie Peoples. He's an on-time God. Yes, he is. Reverberating through the sanctuary, with her fiery, rasp-laden delivery and unshakable conviction. Peoples became one of the defining voices of 90s traditional gospel, a bridge between classic choir sounds of the past and the burgeoning contemporary movement. Yet as the new millennium unfolded, the gospel landscape began shifting beneath her feet. The very same church pews that once swayed to her muscular Sunday morning testify now pulse with Kirk Franklin's hip-hop beats and Ty Tribbett's frenetic praise breaks. Radio programmers chased younger demographics, and the raw, unpolished authenticity that made people's voice so arresting, that made you believe every yes he is, suddenly seemed out of step with gospel's slicker, crossover ambitions. Health challenges in her later years further quieted the powerhouse vocalist who'd once commanded stages with the authority of a woman who knew the Lord for herself. As arthritis and other ailments set in, people's performances became fewer, her once boundless energy now carefully rationed. The industry that crowned her as a queen of traditional gospel now moved on to newer sounds, leaving many of its foundational artists, Peoples included, struggling to maintain relevance in an era of viral worship moments and Instagram-ready praise breaks. But here's what the charts and algorithms will never understand. Dottie Peoples didn't just make music. She made testimonies you could sing. Long after the spotlight faded, her songs kept working in storefront churches and senior choirs, at homegoing services and family reunions. Because when you've lived long enough to know God's faithfulness firsthand, when you sung about his on-time nature while weathering life's delays yourself, that kind of ministry doesn't expire when trends change. 10.
You fall, you can get back up again.
Donnie McClurkin, the complicated legacy of a gospel icon. Few voices in gospel music carry the weight and resonance of Donnie McClurkin's. With timeless anthems like Stand and We Fall Down, he became a pillar of contemporary gospel, his rich baritone delivering messages of resilience and redemption that resonated across generations. For many, McClurkin's music wasn't just inspirational. It was a lifeline, offering hope in moments of despair. Yet for all his musical triumphs, McClurkin's career has been shadowed by controversy, much of it stemming from his public stance on homosexuality. As a self-professed ex-gay minister, he has long been vocal about his belief that same-sex attraction can be cured through faith, a perspective that put him at odds with LGBTQ+ advocates and even some within the gospel community. His comments over the years have sparked protests, boycotts, and heated debates about the role of gospel artists in shaping cultural attitudes towards sexuality. The scrutiny intensified when McClurkin's own past came under the microscope. He has spoken openly about being sexually abused as a child, a trauma he credits with shaping his early struggles with identity. While his personal testimony has brought comfort to many survivors, others have questioned whether his advocacy for change places unfair burdens on LGBTQ+ believers already grappling with acceptance in the church. Then came the scandals, allegations of financial mismanagement, a highly publicized custody battle, and whispers of turmoil within his ministry. Each revelation chipped away at the pristine image of the unshakable worshiper, revealing a man as flawed and human as the people he sang to. 11. Shirley Caesar, the undiminished queen whose crown still shines bright. Time may have softened her spotlight in the ever-shifting gospel mainstream, but Shirley Caesar, the undisputed queen of gospel music, remains a towering force whose influence defies trends and algorithms. At 85 years young, her voice no longer dominates radio playlists like it did in her heyday, when classics like Hold My Mule and No Charge turned Sunday morning sermons into full-blown worship experiences. Yet to measure her impact by chart positions or streaming numbers would be to miss the essence of what makes Caesar immortal. Her later years tell a different kind of success story, one not of decline but of dignified transition. While newer artists chase viral moments, Caesar has settled into her role as gospel's beloved elder stateswoman. Her raspy, fire and honey vocals now carrying the weight of 8 decades lived in unapologetic service to God and community. She still takes the stage when she chooses, her diminutive frame belying the volcanic presence that made her the first lady of hard-driving, testimony-heavy gospel. The crowds may be smaller now, but the anointing? Unchanged. What the mainstream calls relevance, Caesar redefines on her own terms. These days, her ministry extends beyond microphones. Through her pastoral work, her charitable feeding programs in North Carolina, and her role as living archive of gospel's golden age. Young artists still pilgrimage to her for wisdom, knowing that beneath the sequin suits and trademark hats resides a walking masterclass in how to sustain both artistry and faith across generations. 12. John P. Key, the fall and rise of gospel's soulful survivor. John P. Key's story reads like a gospel song itself, full of dramatic valleys and redemptive highs. The man who gave the church timeless anthems like Life and Favor and Standing in the Need spent decades as one of gospel music's most electrifying figures, blending raw, soul-stirring vocals with the gritty testimony of former drug dealer turned preacher. But behind the scenes, Key's life was far from the polished image of a sanctified artist. Legal and financial storms began brewing in the 2010s. Back taxes, lawsuits, and mounting debt that threatened to drown the very ministry he built. At one point, the IRS slapped liens on his properties, and creditors came knocking. The man who sang about God's provision found himself in the kind of desperate need he'd once preached others out of. For a while, it seemed like the weight of it all might break him. Yet if Key's music taught us anything, it's that testimony isn't born in triumph. It's forged in struggle. Slowly, he began rebuilding. He returned to the studio, not with the same flash as his New Life Community Choir heyday, but with the weathered grit of a man who'd survived his own message. Recent albums like I Made It Out 2021 don't just carry melodies, they carry receipts. These days, Key's voice rasps a little harder, his steps move a little slower, but his ministry hits deeper because of it. The same streets that once knew him as a troubled kid now claim him as a father figure, one who doesn't just sing about second chances, but lives them. The financial battles? They're not over. The critics? Still talking. But after surviving addiction, incarceration, and near ruin, John P. Key knows something about weathering storms. 13. The Clark Sisters, a legacy laced with both harmony and hardship. Few groups have shaped gospel music as profoundly as the Clark Sisters. With their razor-sharp harmonies, infectious energy, and trailblazing sound, Jackie, Twinkie, Dorinda, Karen, and Denise became the gold standard for vocal excellence. Pioneers who brought gospel to mainstream audiences without sacrificing its sanctified roots. From You Brought the Sunshine to Is My Living in Vain, their music didn't just inspire, it transformed the genre itself. But behind the glittering performances and Grammy wins, their journey has been marked by trials as gripping as their testimonies. Twinkie, the musical genius behind many of their biggest hits, faced some of the hardest battles, struggles with addiction, homelessness, and health crises that left fans heartbroken. At one point, the woman who wrote and arranged gospel classics was sleeping in her car, a stark reminder of how quickly fortune can fade, even for legends. Other sisters face their own storms, financial strains, illnesses, and the quiet toll of decades spent giving their all to ministry and music. Karen's triumphant return after a near-fatal brain aneurysm became a testament to resilience, while Jackie's unwavering leadership held the group together through shifting lineups and personal upheavals. Yet through every trial, their voices remained a unifying force, proof that even the most anointed aren't exempt from life's fires. Today, their influence is everywhere, in the runs of every young gospel singer, in the DNA of modern gospel and R&B, in the way they taught a generation that holiness and joy could coexist. 14.
I talk. Can I take my time with this one? Sing.
Vanessa Bell Armstrong, the voice that gospel almost forgot. There was a time when Vanessa Bell Armstrong's name was synonymous with gospel music's most electrifying moments. With a voice that could shake the rafters of any church and a stage presence that commanded reverence, she delivered classics like Peace Be Still and Nobody But Jesus, with a power that felt both heavenly and deeply human. In the 80s and 90s, she wasn't just a singer, she was a force, one of the first women to bridge traditional gospel with contemporary flair. But as the new millennium turned, the industry she helped shape began leaving voices like hers behind. Radio playlists narrowed, favoring younger artists with crossover appeal, the raw, unpolished intensity that made Armstrong's performances so gripping, the kind that made you feel the spirit move, suddenly seemed out of step with gospel's slicker, more commercial direction. Personal battles further quieted her star. Health issues and financial strains crept in, the kind that plagued too many gospel veterans who poured everything into their ministry, but saw little financial security in return. There were no dramatic falls from grace, no scandals, just a slow, quiet fading of a legend who deserved more. Yet to those who know, Armstrong's influence never dimmed. You hear it in the vocal daring of today's gospel powerhouses, the way Yolanda Adams bends a note, how Tamala Mann wrings emotion from a lyric. These artists stand on the foundation Armstrong helped build, even if her name isn't always mentioned. 15. Al Green began his musical journey in the gospel genre, captivating audiences with his soulful voice and heartfelt spiritual messages. His early work laid a strong foundation for his career, showcasing his deep connection to faith and the church. Green's gospel roots were evident in his performances, where he infused passion and sincerity into every song, earning him respect within the religious community. However, as he transitioned to R&B, Al Green became an iconic figure in that genre. His smooth vocals and romantic ballads, such as Let's Stay Together and Tired of Being Alone, propelled him to fame, bringing him commercial success and a devoted fan base. Despite his achievements, this shift to secular music often overshadowed his gospel beginnings, leading to a complex relationship with his spiritual identity. Critics and fans alike debated the impact of his R&B career on his original mission as a gospel artist. Ultimately, Green returned to his spiritual roots, becoming a pastor and reaffirming his commitment to his faith. He began to integrate gospel influences back into his music, reminding audiences of the powerful connection between his artistic expression and his spiritual beliefs. Al Green's journey illustrates the challenges artists face in navigating their identities and the pressures of fame, ultimately leading him to reconcile his dual legacy as both an R&B legend and a devoted gospel minister. 16. Tramaine Hawkins' career stands as a testament to the power of a voice that refused to be confined. When she first burst onto the scene with the Edwin Hawkins Singer's historic "Oh Happy Day," no one could have predicted how she would reshape gospel music's boundaries. Her solo work in the 1980s and 90s became the benchmark for contemporary gospel, with albums like "The Joy That Floods My Soul" delivering both spiritual depth and musical sophistication that transcended typical church fare. The criticism she faced performing in secular venues revealed much about the tensions within gospel music during her peak years. While her male counterparts received praise for crossing over, Hawkins found herself defending her artistic choices to those who believed gospel should stay within church walls. Yet her performances at venues like the Montreux Jazz Festival didn't dilute her message. They amplified it, introducing her brand of sanctified singing to audiences who might never set foot in a church. 17. The Weins Family, a gospel dynasty's complicated legacy. The name Winins is synonymous with gospel royalty, a family whose harmonies defined contemporary gospel music for decades. From their early days in Detroit to global stardom, the Winins clan, BB, CeCe, Marvin, Carvin, and the rest of the siblings reshaped the sound of spiritual music, blending silken R&B grooves with messages of faith. Their influence stretches from the church choir loft to the Grammy stage, with timeless hits like "Ain't No Need to Worry," and The Question is cementing their place in gospel history. Yet behind the glittering success, the Winans story carries its share of sorrow and struggle. Ronald Winans, whose smooth vocals anchor the family's signature sound, battled personal demons before his untimely death in 2005 at just 48 years old. Though the family kept details private, his passing marked one of the dynasty's most painful chapters, a reminder that even the most anointed voices face private battles. Other members navigated quieter declines. Some siblings saw their solo careers fade as gospel's tides shifted toward younger, more experimental artists. The industry that once celebrated their polished, crossover-ready sound began chasing edgier trends, leaving certain Winans projects struggling to find their footing. Even BB and CeCe, once unstoppable as a duo, faced criticism when CeCe leaned further into secular R&B, sparking debates about where gospel artists should draw the line. Still, the Winans' impact remains undeniable. Their DNA is everywhere in modern gospel and urban inspirational music, from Kirk Franklin's polished arrangements to the chart-topping collaborations of today. And while not every member sustained individual fame, their collective contribution, through music, ministry, and family legacy, endures. 18. Mary Mary's journey represents one of gospel music's most compelling modern narratives, a story of sisterhood, faith, and the complicated price of breaking barriers. When Erica and Tina Campbell first emerged as Mary Mary in 2000, their groundbreaking sound immediately stood apart. Shackles, Praise Him wasn't just a gospel song that crossed over. It redefined what crossover could look like, blending Sunday morning praise with Saturday night rhythm in a way that felt both revolutionary and inevitable. Their success opened doors, but also exposed the tightrope walk required of gospel artists venturing into mainstream spaces. The duo CeCe Caesar reality show, Mary Mary, provided unprecedented access to their lives beyond the stage, showing the human struggles behind the harmonies. While this transparency resonated with many fans, it unsettled traditionalists who preferred gospel artists to maintain a more polished, spiritually pristine image. The Campbell sisters found themselves navigating criticism that male gospel artists rarely faced for similar career moves. Their collaborations with secular artists became another flashpoint. When they lent their vocals to Kanye West's Ultralight Beam or appeared on mainstream talk shows, some accused them of compromising their message. Yet these moments often became their most impactful ministry opportunities, demonstrating that faith could flourish outside traditional church contexts. Through divorce revelations, public spats, and industry pressures, Mary Mary maintained something increasingly rare in gospel music: authenticity. Tina's raw solo album, It's Personal, dealing with her marriage crisis, and Erica's unflinching transparency about body image struggles showed a depth of testimony that studio albums alone couldn't capture. 19.
It will get better. Gotta get better.
Hezekiah Walker, the choir maestro whose legacy outshines trends. There was a time when Hezekiah Walker's name alone could fill churches. When a mere announcement of his Love Fellowship Crusade, choir would send saints running to their seats. With anthems like Every Praise and Grateful, he became the undisputed king of the modern gospel choir movement, blending Pentecostal fire with hip-hop swagger in a way that made the young and the sanctified shout alike. But as gospel's landscape shifted towards solo acts and viral worship moments, Walker's choir-driven sound, once revolutionary, began to feel like a glorious relic of another era. The industry that once celebrated his mighty ensembles now chased sleeker, more commercial sounds, leaving less room for the raw, collective power of 100 voices testifying in unison. Yet to measure Walker's impact by chart positions or streaming numbers is to miss the point entirely. His true legacy lives in thousands of choir directors he trained, the local church musicians who still lift his songs every Sunday, and the artists like John P. Key and Kirk Franklin who followed his blueprint. While newer stars may grab headlines, Walker's influence hung steadily in the foundation of gospel music, present in every choir that still stomps on a vamp, every director who demands both precision and anointing. 20.
You are wildfire.
Richard Smallwood's career embodies a paradox of gospel music, how an artist can become less visible to the industry while growing more essential to the culture. For over 4 decades, his compositions have served as the musical backbone of black worship, from the grandest cathedrals to the humblest storefront churches. Songs like Total Praise and Center My Joy transcended their era to become permanent fixtures in the sacred music canon. As gospel trends shifted toward hip-hop inflections and praise break spontaneity, Smallwood's classically informed approach, with its deliberate pacing and intricate arrangements, fell out of fashion with programmers chasing younger demographics. Yet this apparent decline in commercial relevance tells only half the story. While no longer dominating charts, his music achieved something more profound: ubiquity in the spaces that matter most. There's scarcely a gospel choir in America that doesn't have a Smallwood piece in its repertoire, or a serious pianist who hasn't studied his sophisticated chord progressions. What looks like diminished popularity from an industry perspective actually represents complete absorption into the tradition. Smallwood didn't fade away. He became part of the foundation. His compositions now function like spiritual standards, passed down through generations of musicians who may never have seen him perform but know his work by heart. At 77, he continues composing and performing with the same quiet excellence that defined his prime, unconcerned with chasing trends because his legacy is already secure in the worship life of the church.